What kind of response did you get?
Well, I think, I guess the way I would characterize it is that they are uniformly concerned about the situation in Iraq, in particular about Saddam Hussein's failure to live up to the UN Security Council resolutions that said he'd get rid of all of his weapons of mass destruction.
The Arab League announced today that at their meeting on Wednesday, they will say the United States should not preemptively attack Iraq to take out any weapons of mass destruction. Reports from your trip around the Middle East that Arab country after Arab country said to you, don't do that, Mr. Vice President. Don't you dare attack Iraq.
That's not the way that I would describe, first of all, their opinions. I had private, confidential meetings at nearly every stop. Those meetings obviously were and need to remain confidential. They're all very concerned about Iraq. They live in the neighborhood. They know Saddam Hussein better than we do. Many of them know that right after us, they're high on his list of governments he'd like to do in.
Did you leave that region feeling that Arab leaders would basically oppose an American action against Saddam Hussein?
No, not at all. What I came away with, Bob, is the sense that they share our concern.
I ask that because the public reaction was, if one just read what those leaders said in public, it was, we're unified against any kind of action against Saddam Hussein. Is that a correct interpretation of the public reactions?
It was mixed, I think, in terms of their public reactions.
On your most recent trip to the region, most of the moderate Arab leaders with whom you met were not very enthusiastic about a U.S. strike against Iraq. King Abdullah of Jordan said to attack Baghdad now would be a disaster. Crown Prince Abdullah said, I do not believe it is in the United States' interests or the interests of the region or the world's interest to do so.
What I would say is that our friends in the region are equally concerned about the problems we see in Iraq, specifically the development of weapons of mass destruction by Saddam Hussein. This is a man of great evil, as the president said, and he is actively pursuing nuclear weapons at this time, and we think that's cause for concern for us and for everybody in the region. And I found during the course of my travels that it is indeed a problem of great concern.
9/11 and its aftermath awakened this nation to danger, to the true ambitions of the global terror network, and to the reality that weapons of mass destruction are being sought by determined enemies who would not hesitate to use them against us. Under the Bush Doctrine, a regime that harbors or supports terrorists will be regarded as hostile to the United States. As President Bush has said, time is not on our side. Saddam has perfected the game of cheat and retreat and is very skilled in the art of denial and deception. A return of inspectors would provide no assurance whatsoever of his compliance with UN resolutions. On the contrary, there is a great danger that it would provide false comfort that Saddam was somehow back in his box. Armed with an arsenal of these weapons of terror and seated atop 10% of the world's oil reserves, Saddam Hussein could then be expected to seek domination of the entire Middle East and subject the United States or any other nation to nuclear blackmail. Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us. The Middle East expert, Professor Fuad Ajami, predicts that after liberation, the streets in Basra and Baghdad are sure to erupt in joy in the same way throngs in Kabul greeted the Americans.
He has aggressively sought to acquire chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons over the years. We have to assume there's more there than we know. What we know is just bits and pieces we gather through the intelligence system, but nobody ever mails you the entire plan. He now is trying, through his illicit procurement network, to acquire the equipment he needs to be able to enrich uranium.
Aluminum tubes.
Specifically aluminum tubes. There's a story in the New York Times this morning we've seen in connection with the hijackers, of course, Mohammed Atta, who was the lead hijacker, did apparently travel to Prague on a number of occasions. And on at least one occasion, we have reporting that places him in Prague with a senior Iraqi intelligence official a few months before the attack on the World Trade Center.
This is a fight to save the civilized world. This is a struggle against evil, against an enemy that rejoices in the murder of innocent, unsuspecting human beings. President Bush has often spoken of how America can keep the peace by redefining war on our terms. But for all the progress we've made in the war on terror, one thing is abundantly clear. Our nation is still in danger. There is also a grave danger that al-Qaeda or other terrorists will join with outlaw regimes that have these weapons to attack their common enemy, the United States of America. That is why confronting the threat posed by Iraq is not a distraction from the war on terror. It is absolutely crucial to winning the war on terror.
During the 2000 campaign, you were on the program, and we were talking about the Persian Gulf War and looking back, and I asked whether you had any regrets about taking Saddam out at that time. And you said no, and then you added this, and I want to talk about it. Let's watch.
Conversations I had with leaders in the region afterwards, they all supported the decision that was made not to go to Baghdad. They were concerned that we not get into a position where we shifted, instead of being the leader of an international coalition, to roll back Iraqi aggression to one in which we were an imperialist power, willy-nilly moving into capitals in that part of the world, taking down governments.
Imperialist power, moving willy-nilly, taking down governments. Is that how we're going to be perceived this time?
Well, I hope not, Tim. And of course, in '91, there was a general consensus that we'd gone as far as we should, that we'd achieved our objectives when we liberated Kuwait.
If your analysis is not correct, and we're not treated as liberators but as conquerors, and the Iraqis begin to resist, particularly in Baghdad, do you think the American people are prepared for a long, costly, and bloody battle with significant American casualties?
Well, I don't think it's likely to unfold that way, Tim, because I really do believe we will be greeted as liberators.